Fox Hollow Farm stood proudly at the end of a long driveway, surrounded by acres of thick woods and quiet fields. The house itself was enormous, built with stone and brick, its windows reflecting the sunlight in a way that made it look almost majestic. To anyone passing by, it appeared to be the kind of property that symbolized success and safety. Families in the area admired it, speaking of how fortunate the owner must have been to live in such a place. The farm was seen as a piece of the American dream, a reminder of wealth, stability, and comfort. But appearances, as often is the case, can be deeply misleading. The man who purchased the property was considered charming by many who met him. He dressed well, spoke with confidence, and carried himself with the ease of someone who had achieved much in life. He presented himself as a respectable businessman, someone who had worked hard for his fortune and deserved to enjoy the fruits of his labor. His outward personality was carefully constructed, a performance designed to gain trust and admiration. Neighbors waved to him when they saw him driving into town. To most, he seemed ordinary in the best possible way, blending into the community without raising suspicion. Inside the home, the rooms were decorated tastefully, filled with expensive furniture and polished wood. It was not the type of place anyone would associate with danger. The spacious living room with its tall ceilings gave an impression of comfort, while the kitchen gleamed with modern appliances. The upstairs bedrooms were neatly kept, and family photographs lined the hallways. Every detail of the house worked together to paint a picture of normalcy, almost too perfectly arranged, as though it were meant to keep prying eyes from questioning what lay hidden. The property itself stretched far beyond the house. Behind the farmhouse, acres of trees swayed in the wind, their shadows shifting across the ground as the sun moved overhead. There were trails winding into the woods, small clearings where sunlight touched the earth, and ponds where birds gathered in the spring. At a glance, it looked like a place of peace and calm, the kind of land someone might use for relaxation or even family gatherings. The vastness of it, however, meant isolation. The nearest neighbors were far enough away that screams, cries, or any strange noises might vanish into the distance without ever being heard. The seclusion gave the property its beauty, but it also gave it something far darker: privacy. There was an unsettling quality that only a few noticed, though most brushed it off without much thought. Visitors sometimes spoke of the house feeling oddly cold, even in the summer months. Others described the woods as too quiet, as if nature itself had grown cautious of the land. Small details like these were easy to ignore, and people convinced themselves it was simply their imagination. After all, the owner seemed respectable, the house looked pristine, and the farm was considered one of the most desirable properties in the area. No one imagined that beneath this polished surface a nightmare was slowly unfolding. The walls that looked so elegant were hiding secrets. The woods that seemed so beautiful would one day reveal their horrors. The perfect farmhouse was more than just a home. It was the carefully constructed mask of a predator who had chosen the land not for comfort, but for control. It was the ideal stage for a performance of terror, one that would leave a stain on the property and the community forever. The early 1990s brought with them an unusual wave of unease in the quiet communities surrounding Fox Hollow Farm. At first, no one noticed a pattern. A young man would go out one night and fail to come home. Families reported them missing, their faces soon appearing on posters taped to streetlights and convenience store windows. Police took down the details, asked the usual questions, and searched the places where these men were last seen. Some had been spotted at local bars or clubs, laughing with friends, blending into the noise and energy of the nightlife, but then the trail always went cold. There were no phone calls, no sightings, no clear answers. It was as though these men had simply vanished into thin air. As weeks turned into months, the number of missing grew. Parents begged for answers. Siblings searched tirelessly, and friends left messages that were never returned. The police were hesitant to connect the cases, pointing out that many of the men were young and independent, capable of leaving on their own. But families knew better. They insisted their loved ones were not the type to disappear without explanation. Something darker was happening, something no one wanted to admit. Whispers began to spread through the community. People speculated about predators lurking in the shadows of the nightlife scene, waiting for those who were vulnerable. Some suggested the men were running into trouble with drugs or crime, but there was never any evidence to support it. Each new disappearance added fuel to the rumors. The streets that had once felt safe now carried a heavy sense of caution. Young men began to watch their backs when they went out, yet the disappearances continued. The last sightings were always unsettling in their similarity. Several victims were remembered being seen in the company of a tall man with a confident smile, someone who seemed friendly enough to disarm suspicion. He was described as charming, well-dressed, and persuasive, the kind of man who could convince anyone to trust him. But the descriptions were vague, blurred by memory and alcohol, and no clear suspect ever emerged. For the authorities, it was not enough to build a case. For the families, it was a chilling clue that their loved ones had been carefully targeted. As the cases piled up, an invisible web began to take shape, though few recognized it at the time. Each missing person was a thread, fragile and easily dismissed when seen alone. But when tied together, the threads revealed a chilling design. The victims were not chosen at random. They were hunted, selected, and lured into the path of someone who understood how to make himself look safe. The pattern was there for anyone willing to see it, but the truth was too disturbing for most to accept. All the while, Fox Hollow Farm stood silently in the background, its sprawling land and secluded house hiding what no one dared imagine. Those who disappeared had crossed paths with a predator who used charm as bait and isolation as his weapon. The disappearances were not accidents, nor coincidences. They were steps in a plan carried out with patience and precision. And though the community did not yet know it, the farm had already become the final stop for far too many. At first glance, Fox Hollow Farm revealed nothing unusual. The wide stone walls, the tidy gardens, and the freshly painted shutters gave off the impression of a home meticulously cared for. Visitors walked through the front doors and saw nothing but order. The floors shone, the furniture gleamed, and everything appeared to be in its rightful place. But it was all a carefully staged illusion. The truth of what lay beneath the surface was far more sinister, and it would take years before the mask began to slip. The woods behind the property held the first whispers of that truth. Investigators who later combed the land described finding small, unsettling fragments that didn't belong. At first, they thought they were animal remains scattered in the dirt, but closer inspection revealed something far more chilling. Tiny bones, blackened by fire, were hidden in shallow pits. Some were burned so badly they had fused with the soil itself, leaving behind a disturbing mixture of ash and earth. Intermixed with them were scraps of clothing, twisted metal from belt buckles, and the occasional shoe that had survived the flames. These discoveries transformed the beautiful landscape into something darker, a silent witness to acts of unspeakable cruelty. The killer had used the vastness of the land as a shield. Every tree, every thicket of brush provided cover. With no nearby neighbors, there was no one to notice the fires burning late at night or the strange movements in the woods. The seclusion gave him confidence. He knew the property was the perfect stage to carry out his rituals, a place where screams could dissolve into the night and smoke could rise without drawing attention. The very isolation that made the farm desirable to buyers also made it the ideal hiding place for horrors. Inside the house, the signs were more subtle but equally disturbing. Some rooms were left oddly empty, as though stripped of their true purpose. Others carried an unexplainable chill, a feeling that unsettled anyone who stayed too long. The basement in particular had a reputation among those who later entered it. Though clean to the eye, the atmosphere was heavy, pressing down on anyone who stepped inside. It was there that much of the violence had occurred, hidden behind walls designed to mute sound. Victims were brought into the home with promises of safety, only to find themselves trapped in a place built not for comfort, but for control. The meticulous way the remains were scattered and burned revealed not just cruelty, but calculation. This was not a man who acted out of sudden rage. It was someone who planned, who thought carefully about how to conceal his crimes. He believed the land itself would keep his secrets buried forever. For a time, he was right. The farm stood proudly in the daylight, admired by passers-by, while, beneath the soil, evidence of countless atrocities waited to be unearthed. The farm became more than just a home. It was a machine designed to hide evil in plain sight. Every wall, every acre of ground, every quiet corner worked together to shield the truth. It was a place where beauty and horror coexisted, where normalcy was only a disguise, and where the dark secrets of Fox Hollow Farm were sealed into the land until someone dared to look close enough to see them. The mask that had once seemed flawless began to crack slowly, revealing glimpses of the truth hidden beneath. The man who owned Fox Hollow Farm had built his life around appearances, carefully shaping how the world perceived him. By day, he played the role of the successful businessman and family man. He smiled politely to neighbors, shook hands with clients, and maintained a charming, confident presence wherever he went. To most people, he seemed ordinary, even respectable. But behind closed doors, his behavior told a different story, one that only a select few would begin to notice. Friends who spent time around him began to recall moments that felt strange in hindsight. He had sudden flashes of temper that seemed out of proportion to the situation. Small inconveniences could send him into quiet rages, his face tightening, his eyes cold. Other times, he grew distant, disappearing for hours or even days without explanation. When asked about where he had been, he would respond with vague stories that sounded rehearsed. It was as if he was juggling two lives and desperately trying to keep them from colliding. At night, when the shadows grew long across the farm, his hidden nature emerged. He prowled through the city's nightlife, watching and waiting. His charm worked like bait, drawing in those who trusted his friendly smile and easy conversation. He knew exactly what to say to disarm suspicion, to make someone feel as though they were safe with him. But safety was the last thing on his mind. Each encounter was carefully planned, each meeting a calculated move in his double life. He thrived on control, and every victim he lured was another opportunity to indulge the darkness he kept buried from the rest of the world. Surveillance and investigation would later reveal just how methodical he was. He did not act recklessly. He selected his targets with precision, watching for those who seemed vulnerable, those who could vanish without drawing immediate attention. His charm was not natural. It was a weapon. His wealth and his polished exterior were not just parts of his personality. They were tools he used to build trust and mask his true intentions. The contradictions in his life became sharper as suspicion grew. On one side was the family man, the man who went shopping with his wife, who attended social events, who kept up the image of responsibility. On the other side was the predator, stalking his victims and returning to the farm to carry out his rituals in silence. It was a performance of duality that shocked everyone once the truth was revealed. Those who knew him socially could not reconcile the friendly man they had shared dinners with and the monster who had been hiding in plain sight. The breaking of his mask was not sudden but gradual, a slow unraveling of the lies he had woven. It was in the cracks of his stories, the unease in his behavior, the shadows cast by his unexplained absences. For years he had convinced everyone that he was harmless, but the closer people looked, the clearer it became that something was wrong. Beneath the polished exterior was a man driven not by success or family, but by a hunger for power, control, and the thrill of deception. Fox Hollow Farm was the stage for this double life, and the mask that once protected him could not hold forever. When the truth finally came to light, the story of Fox Hollow Farm spread far beyond the quiet Indiana community where it began. The discovery of human remains across the property shocked investigators and horrified families who had been searching for answers for years. For many, it confirmed their worst fears. The missing men had not disappeared by choice, nor had they run away from their lives. They had been trapped, hunted, and silenced on land that once seemed ordinary. The farm that neighbors admired as a symbol of wealth and success was now revealed to be a graveyard. The weight of what happened there left scars that could not be erased. Families who had clung to hope were forced to face the devastating reality that their loved ones were gone forever. Communities that once felt safe now lived with the knowledge that a predator had thrived in their midst, hidden behind a mask of charm and normalcy. Each name on the list of victims was a reminder of how deeply the crimes had spread, how many lives had been shattered by one man's deception. The farmhouse itself became a symbol of fear. Even after it was sold, it carried with it an aura that no new coat of paint or renovation could wash away. Visitors who stepped inside often spoke of strange feelings, of cold drafts moving through hallways with no open windows, of footsteps echoing across empty rooms. Some claim to hear whispers at night, voices that seem to come from the walls themselves. Others describe fleeting shadows in their peripheral vision, vanishing when they turn to look. Whether these experiences were the result of imagination or something more, they all pointed to the same truth. The horrors of Fox Hollow Farm had left an imprint that time could not erase. The land itself held its own haunting presence. The woods that once seemed peaceful now carried a heavy silence, as if they remembered what had been hidden in their soil. Campfires burned there no longer, for the thought of flames on that property brought back images of remains destroyed under cover of night. The ponds reflected the sky as they always had, but many could not look at them without wondering how many secrets they still concealed. The beauty of the farm was still there, but it was forever changed, tainted by what had happened beneath the surface. The legacy of the killer reached beyond the property. His ability to live a double life, to present himself as a normal, successful man while hiding the darkest of secrets, left a chilling reminder of how deception can thrive undetected. He was not the stranger lurking in a shadowy alley, but the neighbor with a smile, the man who waved politely, the one no one ever thought to suspect. This realization shook people deeply, reminding them that evil does not always come in obvious forms. In the years that followed, Fox Hollow Farm remained a place of fascination and fear. True crime enthusiasts, paranormal investigators, and curious travelers continued to speak of it, each retelling keeping the memory of its past alive. But for those who had lost loved ones, it was never just a story. It was the place where their lives had been torn apart, where laughter and light had been replaced by silence and loss. The horrors of Fox Hollow Farm lived on, not just in the ground and the walls, but in the hearts of everyone who could never forget what happened there.